Hello everybody, and welcome to Build Your Autodesk Up and Ready Knowledge webinar series. Today's webinar is related to setting up a license manager on Mac OS X and Linux. A few weeks ago we did this similar webinar, the same webinar, but this time we put some more data into it, some more tips and tricks to share with you. Presenter today it will be David Lau, Senior Product Specialist of Autodesk, and my name is Arthur Chachawa. I'll be covering incoming questions during the webinar or after the webinar. So the webinar has two formats basically. The first part when David's going to present the content of the webinar, and the second part when we share and answer the questions. Questions can be asked during the webinar as well through the questions panel from the webinar window you have on your right side. And we'll provide you the answers while the presentation is still going on. Without further ado, I will pass on David. David, you may continue.
Okay, so just to start off, some of the past events, the last 14 events are on our YouTube channel. It's noted in that bit.ly link there. Also for today, I've already uploaded today's presentation, so you can actually just download it if you want and take a look at it as we go live. So again, this PowerPoint is already up on our share drive right now. I've already tested it. It should be good to go. I also want to kind of list all the other events that are coming in the next couple of weeks so that you have an idea what's coming around. And we'll go to the next slide. So the last two events that dealt with Mac and Linux, the number 9, basically that was everything you needed to know about installing and uninstalling Autodesk software on the Mac. There's a link for the presentation and the recording. It was really good. And also, then I presented that one. Avto did the NLM, Network License Manager, on Linux as well. And again, you can download both these PowerPoints right now because they're very, very good. The one that Avto did for number 11, it has a lot more command lines in it, so if you want to do all command line, it's really good for that. I used his presentation and kind of changed it up a little bit so it's a bit more graphics, has more graphics in it. So there's two different styles, so again, all the information's here. If you grab these 3 PowerPoints, you'll be ready to go with setting up your license server on a Mac or Linux. Okay, so we're going to start off with the poll question. The question is, I'll just read it out and then after we'll set up the poll. Did you attend the previous Mac Linux webinars? Yes or no?
We have 70% has not attended the previous webinar. However, 30% of the attendees have attended.
Okay, that's good. So the good thing is it's not a pure repeat of the previous webinar, but so it's a combination of a bit of things. So let's start off with the docs. So one of the things that we always get in product support is, the docs are really, really generic. And that's a question that comes in because, the reason is because we're getting the docs straight out of FlexError. So I try to, and FlexError's docs are very, very generic. So when we get it to Autodesk and all the licensing stuff gets configured for us, we kind of spice it up a little bit. But the problem is the documentation, we're just actually grabbing it from FlexError again, and it's very, very generic. So if I click on this link here, these links are not very helpful sometimes because basically it says download the file. You'll see the command line to install it, and then a very, very generic path to run the command. So I'm going to come back in here again, and hopefully at the end of this webinar, we won't get as many phone calls, so that way you can self-serve it yourself. Basically, you can figure out the problem yourself. Okay. So the next thing is before we even start on Mac or Linux, the first thing is you need to make sure that you have the proper system requirements. For OS 10, it's 10.6 or higher, and for Red Hat, we only support, well actually on Linux, we only support Red Hat, so I just put down the versions in there. For Mac OS 10, for example, 10.6, the reason why it's that version is because that's when Intel started was supported, and the G5 processor, the older processor, was not supported anymore. So that is like, we're only supporting Intel processors basically. That's kind of like a good analogy. So 10.6 that version of the OS doesn't support PowerPC processors. So that's kind of like a bit of historical tidbit info. Okay, next slide. So the first thing we need to do is we actually have to download the license manager. Okay, I put a bit.ly link here, and basically it has all the download links for all the operating systems, so it's like a one-stop shop. When you're installing the NLM on the Mac or Linux, we start off with IPv4. It's the same with Windows as well, so that's like the starting point. If you know your IPv6, I still use IPv4 because it's just the starting point. And then if you notice there's a problem, then we could upgrade to IPv6. Another thing too is I'm kind of like a mix of using command line and a bit of user interface. So some people are really comfortable with command line. Some people like using the user interface. As a Mac user, you like probably using a user interface as well. So there's going to be a combination of the two. A really good tip is dragging and dropping files or folders into the terminal. And I'm going to give you a demo on that in a moment. So basically, it's not a typing exercise. You don't have to type in the whole path, because when typing, you can make mistakes. Another thing, too, is I prefer drag and drop. Another thing that you can also do is we can use the Tab key for auto file completion. This is across the board. You can do it in Windows. You can use it on Linux. You can do it on Mac. So if you're typing in a command prompt, CD space, program, tab, it'll actually go to program files, so it's the same on the Mac as well. So I'm trying to make this a little, compare it to something that you're really familiar with. If everyone knows Windows licensing, doing it on Mac and Linux, it's just as easy. It's exactly the same. The only other thing that you have to do is to open a terminal. On Mac, you basically use Spotlight, type in the word terminal, and you can go there. It's also in application utilities, but it's just more clicking. On Linux, it's pretty easy. There's just an icon. See that little red circle there? And that basically tells you where to open up a terminal, basically. So now I'm just going to do a quick screen capture of our screen of downloading and installing the NLM. Now in the docs, you can do this all in command line, but obviously on a Mac, it's sometimes a little bit easier just to double-click it. So number one, that's the downloaded file from Autodesk for Network License Manager. You're just going to double-click it. It automatically extracts into this little box icon. It's a PKG file. When you double-click that, it should automatically install the software. The only issue that we have, which is you'll have to go into your privacy and security settings and just allow apps downloaded to anywhere, because this app, because it was developed about a year ago before Gatekeeper was securing it, it doesn't have a developer or a publisher called Autodesk in the application, so you do have to make it anywhere. Again, this is also noted in one of the previous webinars that we've had as well. Gatekeeper is one of the things that secure your computer on Mac OS X. The next one is on Linux. Linux is the same thing. Again, I have a screen capture here of the downloaded tar.gz file. When you double-click it, just like in Windows, like if you don't have like WinZip or WinRAR on Windows, when you double-click a zip file, it opens in Windows Explorer. It's the same thing on Linux. It opens into a file explorer, and basically at that point I just drag it back into the folder, like the downloads folder, and then you have an RPM file. The next one is you have to open up a terminal, and this is where you have to do a bit of typing, RPM space IVF, and then you drag that whole file into the terminal, and then basically hit enter and it should install the software. Note, you must type SU. SU is super user, and that's like root or administrator basically. So in Windows, you just log in as administrator, you're done. On Mac, you log in as a regular user, but you have to actually type in the word sudo to run that command. And on Linux, you have to actually type in SU. Again, we'll be coming to that in a little moment. The next item is the key thing that you want to come out of this presentation is the command and the flags are the same. The location of the command is different, and it depends on the operating system. So be prepared to do lots of typing and a little bit of mousing. So in this example, the NLM software, when it's in double-click and installed, it's on OS X, it is in user, local, FlexNet server. In Red Hat, it's an opt FlexNet server. And on Windows, it's in C, Program Files, Autodesk Network License Manager. And again, the only difference is that when you install it, the ADSK Flex there's no exe extension on Linux. So on Linux, it's ADSK Flex, LMGRD, and LMUtil. On Windows, there'll be an exe extension. Okay. So the next item is you have to get a license file. This is kind of like everyone knows how to do it on Windows. And basically you have to grab a serial number, then you need to get your host name, and then you have to have your Ethernet or host ID. And you have to do it on Linux or Mac OS X. You have to do it all in the command line. And so I try to show you here. You do the command user local flexnet server LMUtil, that's where it is. Opt flexnet server LMUtil, and in Windows, C program files. And basically you're going to add these two commands, lmhostid and lmhostname. So that's how the flags are going to look like. So in a command prompt or in a terminal, you're going to see user local flexnet server lmutil. You're going to type in that whole command, hit enter, and it'll go through perfectly. And then finally you have to generate the license file. So now I'm just going to do a quick demo again in some screen captures. Basically, you can see the path user local flexnet server. You have to open up a terminal. And basically all I do is I just drag the lmutil command right into the terminal, and then I just type in lmhostid. And I do the same thing, and then basically hit enter, and then it tells me on my Mac I have 2 Mac addresses. And then I do the same thing again, drag the lmutil command right in there, and then put in lmhostname, and you get the same result basically. And so this is the interesting slide. You can do it the same on Windows. So a lot of the times we actually don't have access to a Mac, or if you're a reseller you may not do it a lot of it. But you can do this all on Windows. So if you've done Windows licensing before, it's exactly the same way. So you're going to open up a command prompt, you do a drag of the lmutil, and you put in the same flags, and you're going to get the same exact result. So in fact, you could use this, like normally you would just open up LM Tools, you can get it that way, or you can go over the command prompt and type in ipconfig, many ways. But if you do it through LM Tools, it's across the board exactly the same. Now the thing is, I don't have screen captures of how to do it on Linux, but 2 out of 3, you can almost, like, I guarantee you the third, like Linux, it's exactly the same result. Okay? So now we have our next poll question. The next poll question. And I'm going to read it out for you. What do the quotes mean in the Windows command? Path matrix in the command line, executable in a command, space in the path of a command. Thank you, Avto, for showing the results. Did everyone get it right? Second. Everyone got it right. So that's really good. That's really good. All right. So the next item is getting your license file. Now this one here, I always call it ADSK_server.lic. Obviously, when you get it, when you generate the file from Subscription Center, it may look like ACAD or Maya 2015 en.lic. You can actually name the file anything you want. But the reason why we always call it ADSK_server.lic is, one, we actually have some automatic restart scripts that are using that exact name. So more on that a little bit later. But basically, this name is constantly used in our in setting up the license server. The next one is the file name. We've been using this since Maya 1.0. We've kind of kept the tradition with AutoCAD and also with Smoke as well, and the other products that are supported on Mac OS X basically. We have an example here of the license file. Again, we have your standard configuration, server, the host name, the Ethernet address. In this case, we've customized the port number. This all looks exactly like a Windows license file. Another note is you can actually set your host name and IP address in the /host file as well. You can also do it on Windows. It's in a different location, but this is a really good location for that. Sometimes you have to kind of hard code it in the OS basically. Okay. The next one is preferred text editors. Now we can all use in Linux. You can use VI. VI is like a command line based editor. There's a lot of shortcuts that you have to kind of remember. I always have to, type in man, which is like the manual, like man space VI to get all the flags. So it's actually a lot easier to just open up TextEdit on Mac, or gedit on Red Hat, or use Notepad in Windows to create the license file. Over here I also have a link for the Red Hat documentation, which basically is saying use gedit or use VI. And VI is very old school. I mean, it's like, you know, Avto's really good at it. I know that for sure. He's really technical. I'm kind of like a mix. You have to kind of review the notes and then you'll remember. So it just depends on the workflow. Okay. So the next thing is on the Mac, which is really important, is when you open up TextEdit, right? The first thing is you have to make plain text. It's under Format, Make Plain Text. And when you do that, the first thing that's going to happen, the reason when you open up TextEdit, if you see a ruler with Helvetica and bold italic, that is rich text, and we don't want that in a license file. So as soon as you make plain text, all those things will disappear, and all you're going to get is a title bar. And that is really, really important when making the license file. And at that point, you just save it, adsk_server.lic. Make sure you save it on the desktop. I always uncheck if no extension is provided, use .txt file and hit save. And basically, once you do that, it'll be perfect. Now the next item is, it may not show the extension on the desktop, and the best way to get or confirm if it has an extension of .lic is basically you're going to right mouse click on the file and get info on it. Okay? On Linux, you're never going to have this problem because gedit will always like put in an extension for you, or you can change the extension. But on Mac OS X, you have to remember that. You can get info and make sure that it says adsk_server.lic. So the next one is you need to configure your license server. Note, the license file in this case on Mac or on Linux, we're just going to put it on the desktop. So that's just a starting point. So then we're just going to run through these commands. So again, I make a note of where to get to the terminal. And in this case, I always like to make a folder, you know, to create a varflexlm folder. And basically, you're just going to type in sudo make dir /varflexlm, and then you type in your administrator password. The next one is changing your permissions, sudo chmod --r. Uppercase R is really important. That means recursive, but there's nothing in the file anyway. 777 varflexlm. And the next one is move, and then there's a tilde, which is basically the key in the corner below the escape key. And that means home directory /desktop /adsk server name, and then there's a space varflexlm enter. And that means, and it'll basically move that file right to the desk, like into the proper folder. And then again, you can do it again in the same thing with Red Hat, same kind of workflow. The only difference is that you type in su enter, put in the root password, and then you start punching in the command at that point. So again, we can do the same commands here again. You're going to open up a terminal, you're going to type in cd user local flexnet server lmutil on the Mac, similar command but a different location on Red Hat, and on Windows it's noted there as well. And in summary, you're going to put in a /lmgrd-c to start that up on Linux. On Windows, you don't really need to put in the /. The // is very Unix heavy. It basically means dot is do it in this directory, the /. That's why it's there. Normally you would think you type in lmgrd, but the // is really important in Linux. On Windows you don't really need it. You can just type in the flag basically. Another note is you can run that command ps-grep lmgrd command, and then you can look for a PID number and kill it as well. There's many. I mean, it's the same way as the activity monitor. You can do it in the activity monitor on the Mac, and the activity monitor is also the same or the equivalent to the task manager. So you'll notice, like if you open up your task manager, you'll see that, and you see processes, there's actually a PID number. It's the same thing on Linux. It's the same idea. There's a PID number as well. Okay. This is the tricky one. There's like one of the biggest questions that we always get into product support is, how do we restart the server? When we restart the server, how do we restart the licensing service? On Windows, it's pretty easy. There's an LM tools for that. You just check on the box, restart server at power up. Everyone knows how to do that. But on Mac and Linux, there's no user interface. So there's a couple of ways to do it. So in the first way, we actually have a older LM tools 11.7 that included the script. And then you basically install 11.7 first, and then you update to 11.12. And again, you can go to the older the previous presentation and download that NLM from there. Okay. The next one I find, and also you'll see that when you go to that download that file, there's like it installs some scripts, and if you open the scripts, you'll see that's like a bunch of scripts. And actually, if you go to the documentation, it's a very long, like a couple of lines of text, maybe about 10 lines of text to basically reboot the server, and it has to be placed in a certain folder to launch it. This one here is pretty easy. Basically, you're just going to create a text file, and then you rename it to .profile, and then you put in that command. And so again, this is what we want. If I go back here about starting the license server, you see how to start your license server /lmgrd, it's the same idea there. It's like the same command. You have to know the command, then there's a -c, and then the file name basically. It's all consistent. Okay? On Linux, it's exactly the same thing. There's a script that you have to create. This is a sample script that you would create. And on the Mac, it's a little bit different, but we've included it in this presentation so you can see how it looks basically. And then again, there's a .profile. Now, there are many, I mean, this is a tough call here. I like using, in this case, .profile because it's only one line of text to put in. So it depends on how you want to do it. Again, I prefer to do the one line. I think .profile is a pretty easy solution to make your server start up. The only disadvantage is that you have to be logged into your computer. So like in Windows, right, you could be logged out of the computer and it's still a licensed server, but on the Mac you actually have to log into your account and then it'll start up. And again, I'll give you a quick demo of that. There's a disadvantage and advantage to some of these. Some of these processes, like the first one, the server should start up automatically and you don't need to log into your computer. But the second one requires you to log in, but you know, whatever is easier. I think Profile is pretty easy. And also, you don't have to look for 11.7 the installer media, basically. The next item is, where are the license files? So just to give you an idea, Smoke is based in Montreal. They put it in a certain location. So it's user local FlexNet server, ADSK server.lic. And then when the client file, it's called Autodesk.lic. On Maya, it's in varflexlm, and the client file is also in varflexlm. In AutoCAD, it's in user local FlexNet server. And again, in in the client file, you actually have to right mouse click on it to get to that location, basically. Again, this is kind of noted in a previous presentation as well. The thing is, the reason why Maya is in varflexlm is it's just that product was developed a long time ago, and we've always put in that folder, so it's pretty consistent. Where user local FlexNet server, that's more like what the documentation states from Flexera. So, you know, I think AutoCAD is using the standard basically. Like I think Maya should use probably user local FlexNet server. The problem is Maya's been around since like, you know, in the 90s, like late 90s. So everyone knows varflexlm, so that's the reason why we put it there. Okay. So that's just some of the history why we put it there. Okay, these are a whole bunch of commands that we commonly use to navigate the terminal. ls is list, cd is change directory, mkdir make directory, chmod is change modification, print working directory, su superuser, sudo is the Mac version of root, cp copy, mv move, rm remove, cat is catalog, but it just basically views the file, head output the first part of the file, vi ps gets a report on processes, kill -9, just kill it, it means like kill a process, tar, rpm, and man. Okay. There's also a Autodesk Smoke team has created a pretty good documentation on some of the commands that they use, and again, I'll be demoing that in a moment, so that's not an issue. So I'm just going to jump over. Just as a super quick review, we posted some basic steps on Mac OS X and on Linux on the blog, kind of tying up all the solutions together, so just to make it a little bit easier. One of the things on the Mac is that if the server doesn't start correctly, I've seen this happen before. You actually have to go into this. So let's say you created a license file and it was for the wrong host name, or you put in the wrong host name, or the Ethernet address was incorrect, and you start the server. There will be an error, but then you can't restart the license server. So what will happen is you actually have to bring up the activity monitor, which is like the task manager, and kill if there is a stray lmgrd or ADSK flex command. So you have to kill those two commands and then rerun the reinstall the startup script basically to start the server. Again, on Red Hat, same idea, but it's pretty rock solid. So if it doesn't start, both those processes will not start. Okay. These are various errors that happen when starting a license server, Signal 34, Signal 36, 37, and the Mac Mini. Again, this is like pre-knowledge network era. Some of them deal with 10.6 or 7. It's really, really old, but it's just good archival knowledge. We may not hit them again with the current OS, basically, but it's just kind of have an idea. A lot of times the errors happen because the license file wasn't generated correctly under the correct MAC address. That's about it for that one. Again, please feel free to review those. Last but not least, on our blog, we also have like a kind of like a quick start link for everything that deals with install licensing issues. So knowledge network, install docs, forums, certified hardware, certified or system requirements. Get ready is a new section that I added in, which talks about install and licensing the products. And lastly, there's screencasts. I just recently found out screencast is now available on Mac and Windows. So one of the cool things about using screencasts is that if you're having a problem, I like using screencasts to record the video to show, let's say, product support the issue. Because sometimes if you're trying to type out the issue, it's hard to explain the exact workflow sometimes. I've been using Pixlr from Autodesk to do any image editing. And again, we have a section on our blog that deal with Mac and licensing issues. And lastly, we're going to come to questions in a moment, but basically this is the location, autodesk.box.com/upandreadyiq15 is the current documentation of the presentation. Feel free to grab that right now. And we're just going to jump into the demo section. Okay? All right, so it's going to minimize this, minimize this. All right, so right over here, this is our NLM right now. And basically, if you double-click this NLM, it will automatically create this little box right here. And at that point, all you have to do is just basically double-click it, hit continue, hit install. And then you put in your administrator password. And hit close. Again, if you want, you can do this all through the command line, but again, as I said, it might be easier just to, run it through the UI basically. If you do decide to do it through the terminal, I'm going to type in terminal. You basically, type in your tar command, space, whatever flags, and then you drag the file into the command prompt. That would be the way to do it. But again, it's pretty easy just to double click it. Okay? So once it's installed, I have here also on the also on our public area the cheat sheet for all the commands. So I mean, I could type this out as well, but I mean, I've kind of put it in here as well so that it's less typing for me. As I said, it's a typing exercise at this point. Over here, we just type in terminal. And in this case, I will type it out just so because I'm a typing person as well. sudo mkdir/va. So this is where the file completion helps out. If I hit the tab key, it auto-completes. You put a /FL/EXLM. Now because I hit tab there and it didn't work because there's no FlexLM directory. I hope this works. Password. This is where you type in the administrator password. The same password you use to install the software. One of the things about using super user or sudo, when you type in the password, you will not see any movement in the cursor. That's a security feature because you don't know how long the password is, basically. I'm going to hit enter. So your password could be 10 characters long, 2 characters long, you don't know. So it will not show you what that is. So it's created the folder. Now here's the bonus tip that is not really discussed. This is part of the UI part of the presentation. If you go and click on go to folder, and you type in the first part, /var, and hit go, it will basically go to the hidden folder, and you will see in here the FlexLM folder that we just created. Okay. Now, I'm going to give you an example here that I'm just going to create a text file. I'm just going to create a text file really quickly. 1 second. Actually, you know what? I am going to close this example file, and I'm going to drag it into the FlexLM folder. And you'll see here, authenticate. And then I have to type in my administrator password. That is painful for me because I know I want to put the file there. So in Mac OS X, and like in Windows, sometimes you just want to drag a file into a folder and it just goes there. And so in the next command, we're going to be doing a permissions on it. So if I drag this back out, it actually makes a copy of it because it's in a administrator folder basically. I'm going to delete this file. I have to put in because this is like a root or super user folder right now, or highly not like it's only for administrators to use, I have to authenticate every time I go in. And so basically in the next command, I just talk about doing a chmod on it basically. So right over here, I'm just going to put in that command. I'm going to type it out. Sudo chmod uppercase R 777. And because I've created a directory, I can type in VA tab and then type in FL tab, and it automatically goes there. I hit enter, and it goes. And so now, what's really cool is I can now drag this file in here. No authentication. I can drag it back out. No authentication. There's also a way to do it in the user interface. If you right mouse click again and get into Get Info, right down here under Sharing Permissions, it tells you your read-write permissions. Again, you just have to hit the unlock. So I didn't really discuss this in the presentation because this is kind of like little bonus on Mac OS X. So you'll see here, read-write, read-write, read-write. That's what 777 means. Okay? Okay, so now let's just open up the file and we'll just jump to the next command. The next command is moving this license file. So right now I have this license file already created, and it's for Autodesk Smoke. And as a bonus, I've used the license parser before. If you haven't attended any of the other licensing seminars, licenseparser.com is a tool to look at your license file in plain English. So I can just go to my desktop, submit file, and basically you'll see here Autodesk Smoke. That's what I'm licensing. It doesn't really matter. I know it'll be the same for Maya or AutoCAD on the Mac basically. Okay. So obviously I can drag the file into the folder, but we're going to use command line. So I'm just going to go copy. This time I'm going to do a copy and then do a paste. I'm going to hit enter, and it just disappears. Look at that. That's awesome. Okay. So the next one here, I'm just going to make this window a little bit smaller, and I'm actually going to open up another Finder window, and we're going to go to Folder, and we're going to open up /user/local. And you're going to see in here, this is our FlexLM stuff. Okay. Again, I'm going to do a bit of drag and drop, but you could type it out as well. It is up to you. It just depends. But in this case, I will just do it. You can go like, I'll do half copy, half paste. How about that? So we'll do a copy, paste, enter. I'm going to do an ls. That lists everything. I always remember this one, ls minus la. I think of LA, it's long and all, but basically I think of Los Angeles. That's the way I remembered it since the dawn of time. So if you go ls minus LA or Los Angeles, you're going to get full details on permissions, user, file size, date, etc., etc. So it's the same way of listing. So there's two lists. I always do ls minus la. I'm kind of old school that way. Okay. So right now I'm going to hit clear. Another bonus tip. It kind of resets it back to the top. And so right now I'm just going to type in, I'm going to start the license server, sudo space /lmgrd. That's because I'm in that folder. And then basically space. Now the thing is I could, -C, so I'm going to do /var, hit tab, FL tab. I hit tabs for that, and then AD tab. I tabbed through all that, so I didn't have to type it out. So this is not a typing, it's like a partial typing exercise. But you know what you can also do? And I've shown it to you before on the Mac and on Windows. You can drag this file in there, and see how it adds a little section there, private? It's because it's a hidden folder, but it still works. I'm going to hit enter, and there you go. That looks like your license server. Now, if I'm going to go back into the presentation really quickly, and if you want to capture some of these flags, let me just go back a little bit, sorry. Go back here, I think it's here. These are the additional flags that you can do to kind of make it do, like this is basically putting the status and putting the status report on the desktop. You can also put the debug log file in that location. So again, the most basic is just here, and then you can add those flags afterwards just to see the results basically. Okay. The other one is, I'm going to just hit enter a couple of times. So now it's like clear, and you're like, oh, I don't know if it's running. How do you know if it's running? And so basically this command here, I'm going to copy it out, paste it back in. And that gives me kind of like the perform status inquiry in Windows basically. It says I'm all good to go. Okay. So the next item is, we want to stop the server, and in Apto's presentation previously, there's like a command called lm down, right? And so one of the cool things, just like on Windows, because I like to try and use like an analogy, Windows is, everyone knows Windows, right? In here, if I go into my activity monitor, and I choose CPU, or is it disk? No, I think it's, there it is, disk, it is disk, my apologies. You're going to see in here the ADSK Flex running, and down a little bit further, the LMGRD. There you go, LMGRD. And so just like on Windows, when you have a server running, you'll see ADSKFlex.exe running, and you're going to see LMGRD.exe running. You're also going to see in here the PID number right here. So if I go in here, LMGRD, and so if I wanted to stop the license server, I could basically, option 1 is double-click this and hit quit. That's like using the user interface. This is Apto's. I love using the kill -9 because that's like old school Unix. I love it. So this is the PID number, 1743. So you could do it through a PS command, but I mean, I'm kind of like a combination of user interface and command line. So if you do, I hope this works. Kill -9 space. I hope this works. 1743. Please work. Oh, I have to do sudo, su, do kill -9. I hope this works. Enter. Did it work? And there it is. It just killed it. And so now LMGRD is done, and ADSK should be done as well. I hope it is. Let me go process name. ADSK, is it still there? Sorry, I have my mouse on some weird reverse scroll. So now I've basically killed the server, and if I do my, now I just hit up arrow a couple of times to bring the command, and it says the server is not running. Okay? So that's a way of killing the server. Using the task manager, kill -9, or LM down. You can all those commands you can basically use. Okay? So the next item is down over here, making a file invisible. And this is part of the quote-unquote .pro file. So this is kind of cool here. If you ever, I'm just going to create a text file here. Let me do a new one. File. New. Okay. So I'm going to go in here and hit File, Save. I'm going to save it on my desktop. I'm going to call it Top Secret. And there you go. That's Top Secret. But you know what? It's not really top secret because you can actually see the file, right? So basically, I'm going to go in here. I'm going to scroll back down. I'm going to hit clear. I'm going to do CD enter. When you hit CD, it goes back into the home directory. I type pwd, print working directory. I'm in the home directory. I'm going to CD into desktop, enter, ls. I do ls minus la. And you're going to see in here, top secret. Okay? So this is kind of funny here. Top secret, it's kind of, you can still see it, so it's not really top secret. So how do you make it invisible? You basically put a dot in front of the file name. But the problem is you can't actually just go in here and type it. Well, maybe you could. I think you can just go in here and just type in dot. And it goes, you can't use it because these are reserved for system. Choose another file name. So you can't put a dot to make it invisible. So you have to do it through a terminal. So this is why it's important. So you basically do mv, which is move, the file name, top secret, dot, top dash secret, same file name, dot RTF. And when I hit enter, this file will disappear. If you do an clear ls, you can't see it here. It's completely invisible, ls minus la, but it is there, top secret, RTF. So I'm not saying that this is a good way of storing your passwords and making it invisible, but it's kind of cool. But why this is really important is because in the presentation with previously, you can actually create a dot profile. So again, I'm going to go over here. In the presentation over here, we'll do it on Mac. You're basically creating a dot profile. Again, you can do it through VI. You can create it as a text file. There's many ways, but it's basically a dot profile is basically a text file with no extension with a dot in front of it. So I'm just going to go in here and just copy this line because I know it's correct. Everything, I know the paths are valid. I'm going to go CD, enter, ls. I got to go up back a directory, ls, pwd. I got to go back into assist again, ls, ls minus la. So I'm going to create a file in that directory. So I need to make sure user, assist, I have to be in this folder. I need to create a text file. So we'll just bring a text edit, file, new, make plain text. I'm going to paste this command. I'm going to save it on my desktop for now. Save. I'm going to call it profile.txt. Enter. So there's a couple of commands again. I'm going to do cd space desktop. ls. So there's my profile. So I can remove this extension. That's going to be like part of the UI part of it. I'm just going to go that way. Yes, I'm going to remove my extension. So then again, clear ls. Now it's called profile. Not very helpful. And I'm just going to double check the PowerPoint presentation in your home directory. So it has to be in this directory in here. I'm going to put the file in here. So now I'm going to go cd space. I'm going to drag this file in here like this, ls. There is profile. I need to make this invisible. So again, you just type in mv space profile. Let me rephrase profile to dot profile. And it disappeared. And then ls minus. And basically when your Mac reboots, this one tiny little file will make your license server reboot. Okay? There's another couple of items that we have to focus on as well, which is discussed on the blog, is when you start your license server, the energy saver, the computer can never go to sleep, okay? You can make the display fall asleep, but the computer cannot, because when you run that service in the task manager basically, or in the activity monitor when it's running, when the computer goes to sleep, it doesn't know how to bring it back up. So that is a really good tip that you should always have this never falling asleep basically, and it should work perfectly, okay? I don't want to reboot my computer right now because basically if I reboot my computer, the server will start up, but then the presentation will end. But you're going to have to trust me that it will come up. What's going to happen, the behavior is once you reboot your computer and you log in, it takes a couple of seconds for that process to start up. So usually what I'll do is I'll bring up the activity monitor and just look at ADSK Flex powering up basically. All right. So last but not least, I'm just going to give you one last part is I'm going to do the same license server on Windows. Just to give you an example, I'm going to kind of log into my laptop running Windows. Oh, look at that. So I'm going to have to minimize there might be a bit of an echo. Let me go into my audios. Mute, okay. There you go. I muted every. So on Windows, it's the same idea. I'm going to delete LM tools, but make sure I stopped it. This is my license file. I love Autodesk. Windows people are a bit more creative in creating your file. Bring up your command prompt. We're going to bring up the task manager. There is no ADSK Flex running. LMGRD, same command, sp -c, and then you drag the license file. And hit enter. And all that just showed up. And if we bring back the task manager, it should come up if my license file is valid. That's there, LMGR. That didn't go through. We can now analyze the error. I might have to redo this. LM. It should work. You know what? I will probably send out an email to let people know what happened. So I'll end it off with any other question. Afto?
Yes, hello, David.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, do we have a few questions? Now, so the first question was, like, if we prefer the Mac or Linux network license manager over the setting up a license manager on Mac on Linux versus on a Windows side. I personally prefer the Windows side to set up a license server. It has a GUI mode. It also has a command line tools you can use, the same type of command lines you can use on the Windows side, on the Mac and Linux side. And also, there is lots of kind of, you can set up as a service, you can set up, you can use configure the firewall, they reconfigure the firewall. So there's lots of different help items available in case something goes wrong and you need some support to set up a license server on the Windows. Because the main thing, with the license server setup is that you need kind of good network connectivity between client and server, and that's a kind of a drawback of the network licensing. And when you have Mac and a Windows mixed environment, sometimes connection from a client and a server needs to be kind of very tweaked. Sometimes you may need to use the IP address to reach your client's your license server from the Windows system. Sometimes you may need to use the hostname. Sometimes you may need to use the hostname.local, which is a shared name on the Mac server. And this type of networking issues, which one can see or experience, when it has a mixed environment, does cause a problem. But if you have a license server set up on a Windows side, it looks like, and it seems like from my experience, that anybody can reach to it and grab the license from there. So that's my personal preference, using the Windows side and setting up a license server there. Another question was, if dot profile needs to be invisible. So dot profile, that's basically a text file, which is a hidden file, and that's a login script. So it acts like a login script for the user who is logged in. So once you create that profile file in a text editor, and it has no extension to it, so as soon as the user logs in, whatever the commands the user puts inside a dot profile will get executed upon the user login on the Mac. So if you restart the system, but that particular user is not logged into the system, the service will not start automatically. So that's to prevent then when you need to set up scripts, which we talked about, and David in previous license server setup webinars, as well as David in this particular webinar as well. And the scripts it can be automatically installed from NLM version 11.7, as well as if you go to the previous webinar box share folder, you can also download these two scripts to start the server automatically after restarting it. So regarding the dot profile, you can, besides having the command line, you can also put environment variables there too, take effect when that particular user logs in on the system too. So that's sometimes, maybe you want to set up like a DSK Flex license file environment variable. Maybe you want to set up like FlexLM _ diagnostics environment variable, or many other stuff, when you're using and trying to kind of troubleshoot issues, coming from or create a specific environment for the user, who is logged in on the Mac on Mac OS X or on a Linux system. So now there's a question that, like there was an error in the log file. So not exactly sure which log file is mentioned here. If you mean like, when David started the license server from a command line, and you saw the debug log output of the debug log file, which you normally see on a Windows side, when you see the kind of debug log file on a Windows side, when you set up a license server, debug log file is a specific file created, right? On the Mac side, when you start license server from a command line, the output of the debug log file is seen on a screen. So that was the reason, in one of the command lines, I would suggest you adding the -L and specifying the file there, file name, where to capture the debug log file information. Now, David's log file, the error message is there. So when you start the license server, the FlexLM, the way it's based, is looks for the host name and expects to find a host name inside the server license file. Okay, but looks like David had a license server a network license file configured with the loopback address, which was 127.0.0.1, which again made the license server start. However, you saw that kind of the error message saying that maybe the host name was not the actual host name of the system, which is inside the license file. So that's type of error messages. But again, when David ran lm start command, we saw that the license server was actually running. So that type of messages, which is given by the FlexLM, can be ignored, as long as you get a correct output from your lm start command, and you are happy to see that your license is available, and all the license counts are there, so there shouldn't be any kind of problems. Yeah, I typically look into the debug log file only if I cannot get the license server status inquiry and it matches my expectation, when I run the license server.
Okay, before we leave, I just wanted to rerun the command, and during Apto.
This is the Windows side.
Question.
Okay.
Yep.
So
I reran it because I had an expired license file.
Oh.
So now, if I it will work as and you'll see ADSK Flex and the LMGRD running.
Oh.
Anyways, just want to get back to that one.
So we don't have any more questions at this time.
Let me just check to Apto. Do we have any other questions, Apto?
No, there is no more questions at this time. But if you, Dave, if you want to show some other tips and tricks on the Mac, we still have. Oh, we have almost 1 minute. So thank you everybody for attending for today's webinar, and hopefully we'll see you on the next webinar sessions as well.
Yep.
And thanks again from me, from Apto. Dave.
Thanks for attending that, and always in any demo, I always like to try and solve the problem. So I'm glad that I was able to figure out the problem, because it was just a bad license file. Because it's worked before, and I know it works, and it's universal. Mac, Windows, Linux, it's the same command, so I know it should work. All right, thanks, guys.